At 8:41, it's time to go through some of the papers today with the Deputy Editor of Spite, Fraser Myers, and, oh, no, it says Deputy Editor of the Spite. Are you Assistant Editor?
Assistant Editor.
Oh,
beg your pardon.
Can I say, sounds much more sophisticated.
Oh, thank you very much.
So you better learn that, Fraser. Cindy, you, good to see you both this morning. Fraser, this has actually been... This was around
This
on
has been
Thursday.
rumbling around for days, hasn't
But
it?
Catherine Burble-Singh, who's this very, very strict but gets good results head teacher, she wants the school to be non-religious.
Yeah, she's often dubbed Britain's strictest head teacher.
Yeah.
She runs a really great school in North London, in Wembley. It's a very poor, deprived area. All of the pupils are from, a huge variety of ethnic minority backgrounds. But they get absolutely phenomenal results. Some of the best improvements in GCSEs and things like that. But there's now a row rumbling at the moment because essentially the school has instituted a ban on prayer rituals and it's being sued over it. It's currently a case it's going through the High Court. Now, this started at some point last year. A young Muslim girl started praying in the playground, using her blazer to pray, and then it quickly grew and grew and grew, and other Muslim pupils started joining these rituals. And then other sort of religious influences started growing in the school. So there were girls reporting that they were pressured into wearing the hijab. A girl was decided to stop going to choir because she was told by her fellow pupils that it was haram to be a part of the choir during Ramadan. So they realised that, one of the key things about the school is that, everyone is treated the same. They all sit together in meals. They don't really have free time. Even in break time, it's supervised. They're only allowed to have a maximum of 4 people in a group, so people don't get left out.
But there's no talking in the corridors.
There's no talking in the corridors, and everyone also eats the same meals at lunchtime, again, so that everyone is treated the same, there's no differences, so that people don't sort themselves into the kind of groupings that they might do in the outside world. And it works. It creates a genuine sense of cohesion. But this lawsuit is challenging that effectively.
She's going to lose it, though, isn't she?
I think she might do, yeah. I mean, the government's advice on this is really confused. Part of it basically says that schools don't have an obligation to provide prayer rooms, but it also says that you have to respect the right to pray and respect that part of the Islamic religion. So basically, this is a bit of a landmark case. It's a bit of a landmark case. I think we don't really know exactly what's going to happen, but it does. I mean, given that the school allows children to wear hijabs, there are certain levels of religious markings that are already allowed. So where do you draw the line between that and prayer mats, that and designated prayer time? I think it's a difficult case, to be sure.
Yeah.
One thing it's important to stress, though, is that although, obviously the people involved in the case are presenting this as an Islamic requirement, it isn't, frankly. And in Turkey and Pakistan, schools do not have breaks for prayer. This is actually, quite a hard line demand. In Islam, you can actually, you're allowed to take prayers later on if you miss them during the day. People have, busy lives. Slightly different during Ramadan. Obviously, that has to be respected. But so I think what is interesting is that there is almost like an Islamist campaign to differentiate Muslims or to impose...
or to disrupt her common sense attitude.
And to disrupt, what is, The other thing is that she has, denied religious requests to other religions. So, there are revision classes, on Sunday, even though that upsets the Christians. Hindus have been asked to ensure that, certain eggs don't touch their meals and things like that. They've been denied that request. An interesting one, Jehovah's Witnesses have requested that kids don't study Macbeth because they're not allowed to learn about texts that feature magic. She's denied them that right. So this is not she is not, waging an anti-Islamic campaign. She is enforcing strict secular rules that everyone should abide by.
Well, look,
parents know that this is what the school is.
Well, and the bottom line is, and I went to a church school, and I would, if I had children, I would send them to a church school. But nevertheless, she's getting results, and you can't argue with that. And
she's getting results because of her... this is essentially a massive social experiment, and she knows, she's very thoughtful about it, and she's doing this integrating stuff
Why would somebody want to disrupt that? And is it the pupils who are is it coming organically from the pupils, or is it being organised from home?
I think almost certainly there must be a degree of adult influence.
Yeah.
I mean, children don't know how to deal with
And isn't it
courts.
the case that £100,000 have been raised in legal aid against the school? So there is some kind of crowdfunder going on.
Why disrupt something that's working?
But there is a broader animosity to this school as well. I think people on the Liberal left really hate this school. They hate Catherine Birbalsingh because she's a quite proud Conservative, but also because the school shows up a lot of Liberal left shibboleths. It shows that actually, racial identity politics is bad. We shouldn't treat working class people or black people or Muslim people with the bigotry of low expectations. If you have high standards for everyone, make people work hard, then they will do well.
Yeah, well, which is the bottom line, I think. Interesting one in the Express this morning, Cindy, because I wondered what they were going to do with HS2 stuff that they've knocked the houses down and all the rest of it.
And they've spent £600 million buying all this land that they're not going to use for HS2. So campaigners are calling for a nature superhighway to be running across that. And some parts of it are quite narrow, but some parts of it are really broad. So what we could have is a very exciting cross-country nature park, basically. And biodiversity in the UK the UK actually has one of the worst biodiversity environments in the developed world.
It would be great, and it could be a tourist attraction.
Exactly. And a good way to make a success out of it, because otherwise they would have to flog off this land at lower prices, so they'd be making a loss in any case. But I mean, that requires this government making some kind of shrewd decision, and so I'm not sure that it will succeed. But I think it's such a lovely idea to turn this kind of wastage into something good.
Almost turns it into a sort of national park.
Exactly.
Doesn't it, again? Yes, which, we could go to. We'd love to go for a few days and walk along it.
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
That sort of thing. I'd do it.
Although I can't help but feel that building the actual train line would have been better for the environment in the long run.
Well, this is the other thing. I mean, the questions remain over if Labour government come in later this year. Are they going to revive this? So again, we're back into the dithering, will they, won't they?
Well, that's right. And this is what this year is going to be like, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nothing's going to get decided until we know.
No. Interesting one in The Guardian, because there's all the heat on Boris Johnson at the COVID inquiry. There's a Scottish sort of COVID inquiry going on as well. Nicola Sturgeon has apparently deleted her WhatsApp messages.
Nicola Sturgeon doesn't have a single WhatsApp message from her time during the pandemic, and funnily enough, nor do many members of her top team.
That's
very mysterious. And what's interesting is that Nicola Sturgeon, when she announced Scotland's COVID inquiry to great fanfare, she didn't need to, by the way, because Scotland's decisions are also scrutinised in the main UK COVID inquiry. She did it just as a sort of grandstandy thing. She said she wanted to be extra transparent. I'm more transparent than the Tory government. And now she's been shown... I mean, everyone knows that, there's something not right here. If she had auto-deleted messages... which is possible, and some people have, then she would have surely known that at the time that she announced the inquiry.
So I think what happened, probably the Matt Hancock diaries, all the WhatsApps flying around with Simon Case, the other senior civil servants, with senior health officials, showed her, God, if my WhatsApps come out too, and the inquiry has the power to do this.
On the one hand, you don't blame her, because how ridiculous was it that WhatsApp should have been private, and suddenly it gets exposed and...
I think the problem is this governing by WhatsApp. A lot of the things that would have in a previous generation been done by email, like traceable options in work email inboxes, and now over WhatsApp. So that mixes the personal with the professional.
According to techie experts, even if you delete them on your phone, there is software that can revive them and bring them back.
Well, there we go. Maybe we'll see Nicola Sturgeon's messages after all.
I do feel a bit sorry for the politicians who, whose WhatsApps are being exposed, because they did have a genuine belief that what they were saying was in private, and you do have to have sort of private channels of communication, or at least to be able to if in a cabinet room to be able to discuss things, to test ideas, to say things that are not necessarily going to be the final policy, the final announcement. I think that's reasonable. But I think it's the hypocrisy with Sturgeon that grates. She was, so hard on everyone, and the SNP and, their supporters were so hard on Boris Johnson for not having every single one of his WhatsApps available to the inquiry, but they're not going to be able to deliver any of them.
And Scotland has, had flaws during its pandemic response. The care homes, they had unclear instructions what to do with those who are positive, go into hospital or don't go into hospital. They were 8 hours away from a total PPE outage at one point.
Gosh.
So these are the questions that need to be answered.
Yes.
But can't really.
None of the right questions are being asked
Per
anyway.
capita, more people died in Scotland and in Wales, despite the fact that Nicola Sturgeon poses as Mrs. Lockdown, believing that she saved more lives. It's not the case at all.
Can we move on to this amazing story about what's happened in a forest in Devon? Because we were talking about it at 6 o'clock this morning. We've never actually got round to it. Cindy, tell us what's happened.
Yeah. So these giant tortoises are actually from the Seychelles. So the fact that they've ended up in the forest in Devon, sadly not alive, dead, 7 of them found dead. By the
7, is it?
Yeah, 7 of them found dead.
And they're like these the huge giant tortoises, like the ones we usually see on Galapagos.
Yes, I don't think it's quite that species, but they are still vulnerable species themselves. And they cost around £10,000 per tortoise. So it is possible to own them. There are very legitimate ways to own them. But clearly not clearly actually, what we don't know what's happening is that 7 of them have been discovered far from where they were born, dead, clearly left there. So the question is, was it a smuggling gang? Was it an owner who was unscrupulous and couldn't afford the upkeep? Because they do need to be kept very, very warm.
Yeah.
And so the RSPCA is looking into that, and there's a police investigation going on as well.
It needs to be. It's a disgrace.
It is.
Yeah, well, clearly, because, given the speed they moved, they didn't make their own way to Devon.
No, exactly. And they couldn't have escaped either, so they were definitely
They must have been smuggled, mustn't they?
Smuggled and then
It was some, maybe they died and the smugglers just had to get rid of them.
Yeah, and they were quite young as well, so so it could also have been like an owner thinking that they could look after these animals, but actually after a cold winter, the upkeep was very expensive. So instead of doing anything about it, like doing them or, rehoming them.
Mind you, it's also very stupid because even if they died innocently, how that works out, I don't know. But the shells and everything would be worth a fortune.
Yeah.
I mean, if only for posterity.
Yeah.
I mean, I would never advocate sort of farming or killing for the shells. But if something dies naturally...
Yeah. So it does feel like there's foul play going on.
But it's so tragic. At the end of the day, they are incredibly exotic, amazing animals. And they shouldn't have been treated so
badly. They live for over 100 years, usually, if they were kept in the right conditions. I don't think this is the same species, but one of, Charles Darwin's tortoises from the Galapagos, Harriet, was owned by Charles Darwin and later by Steve Irwin.
Really?
The
same tortoise, yeah. Over 100 years later.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how long they live, yeah.
It's phenomenal, isn't it? All these animals need to be treated with respect.
And such a shock that apparently it was discovered by just a passerby, somebody who was out walking on a very frosty morning, I presume, and came across what they realised then were these giant
And there's some quite
tortoises.
horrible pictures of the corpses as well, so you can't imagine that,
Not a pleasant experience.
Yeah.
Look, Cindy, Fraser, it's been great to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Loads of you getting in touch about the pets law as well. I was talking about animals. The government's now looking at changing it so that to steal a pet is a criminal activity, which it isn't at the moment.
Yeah, it's not just a belonging. It is now
Crazy,
a very important member of the family, frankly.
Here's your weather.